Atlantis Software budget gaming gems for the Atari 8-bit computers and your Atari 400 Mini coming up next. Atlantis Software was a London-based budget game house that delivered 16 games for the Atari 8-bit, 6 of which I think are hidden gems that many Atari 8-bit owners, especially in the USA, have never heard of. Almost all 16 Atlantis Atari 8-bit titles were released after the XEGS sold out its entire 1987 Christmas run of 100,000 UK units, which provided an incentive for budget houses that had previously ignored the Atari machines to start producing 2 and 3 pound cassette titles to place on the other micros shelf next to the racks and racks of C64, Speccy, and CPC software. It's unlikely that everyone will like all 6 of these games as much as I do, but I feel there's a title for pretty much everyone in this bunch. So let's get started with a 1989 Arkanoid clone that was probably more in line with budget-conscious 8-bit owners than the full-priced Imagine port from 2 years earlier. Crack Up is a 1989 Simon Leck game who also crafted Death Race, another title on this list. This is a relatively simple game that provides joystick-controlled breakout gameplay with added drop-down power-up pills like Arkanoid, but with no enemy ships in the way at the top of the screen as in the Taito arcade title. The power-ups are as follows. B, or bonus level, takes you to the next of the 32 levels. C gives you the ability to catch, then release the ball. D gives the player double balls. E, extend your bat. Note, the little E is light blue, like Viagra, which was kind of prophetic in 1989. L gives the player laser fire, but unlike Arkanoid, it's a single shot at a time, and I feel like I did better without it, but it's a welcome addition anyway. S slows the ball down, and X gives an extra life. The Atari Mania audience gives Crack Up a 71%, which is pretty high for a budget game, and I agree with them. It's well made, but very difficult even on level 1. Still, this type of game needs to be challenging to be fun, and the challenge in Crack Up doesn't come from poor control or collision detection, but from honest, difficult levels. Paul Rickson in Page 6 magazine agreed that while it's a budget title that is not outstanding in any respect, it will appeal to anyone looking for an updated version of Breakout at a budget price. (1988's Dawn Raider is a nicely crafted budget Super Cobra style shooter with the difficulty up pretty high. You control your helicopter with the joystick and can fire missiles straight ahead with the fire button and bombs by pushing down and doing the same. Because of the tight corridors, bombing is tricky and a huge challenge. You need to bomb and shoot the F and A icons though for extra fuel and ammunition, which again is very tricky, but those will both run out soon if you don't. I find Dawn Raider to be a nice looking, nice playing, budget title that again, like Crack Up, is not challenging because of poor control or cheap deaths, but because of game design. Atari Mania users agreed, and have given it a hefty 83% so far, which is higher than some full-priced Atari 8-bit classics. Paul Rickson, again in Page 6 magazine, loved it, calling $1.99 a ridiculously low price for the quality of the game, and one to certainly check out. Simon Leck, who authored Crack Up and Cops and Robbers, a game that just barely missed this list, gave Atari users a Turbo Arcade clone in 1987's Death Race. This game consists of a simple but fun and nice looking slalom course with no curves, where the players are given 5 lives to pass a certain number of cars within the time limit, which will then extend the race further. Death Race's fun simplicity reminds me of a handheld electromechanical racing game I got for Christmas in 1981. It's not complicated, and it's well done. Atari Mania users didn't give it quite the praise I have, with only 60%, which is the minimum score a game had to have to make it on this list. Paul Rickson, again, with a great review of this first Atlantis release for the Atari 8-bit machines, called it a commendable effort that he hoped showed that Atlantis was going to make more good Atari 8-bit games. 1989's Gunfighter is unique here, as I'm not quite as taken by it as the Atari Mania audience seems to be, but its score was high enough to be considered here as at least a minor hidden gem. Gunfighter is a little bit of an action arcade puzzler, where the player is tasked with searching for outlaws in an Old West town and capturing them to return stolen property deeds back to the townsfolk. As mentioned before, the Atari Mania audience score for this one is a nice 73%, which is much higher than the current 60% for Death Race, so I pushed myself to include it here. I like the idea and the depth, but the execution, to me at least, seems to leave a lot to be desired. There were no Atari reviews for this one that I could find, but because Atlantis ported a lot of their budget titles to multiple platforms, I found a Yor Sinclair review where they liked the graphics, but called it tedious and boring. They gave it a 4 out of 10. I'll leave it up to you guys to let me know if you find the Atari 8-bit version more fun than I did. Periscope Up is a 1988 release where the player must progress through undersea caves using a submarine and its more maneuverable gun-toting mini-sub to solve puzzles and explore. The mini-sub is needed to collect keys, items, and numbers in a passcode needed to complete the quest. The caves are tight and the sub is not as controllable as the player might like, but the mini-sub deployed with the fire button can fit in tight spaces but also zips along at a quicker pace, making it even more dangerous in the tight undersea caves. I really had fun, but a huge challenge trying to play Periscope Up, as it reminds me of a budget version of what could have been a Synapse Software classic if it had a bigger budget and more time to work out a few of the bugs. As it is though, the Atari Mania audience gave it 70%, and our old friend Paul Rickson in Page 6 magazine said that it was Atlantis Software's best release to date. Because I love shooters so much, Titan, the last game on this list, is an obvious favorite. In this thinking man's blaster, the player is tasked with protecting 5 planets and destroying 3 formations over 4 difficulty levels. All of this is accessed from a galactic map. There are numerous weapon upgrades and 2 different types of gameplay that offer enough variety, especially for a game that arrived in 1990 for £2. The Atari Mania audience gives Titan a humble 63%, but the Sothen brothers, Barry and Brian, who coded this and also classics Joe Blade and Arcade Fruit Machine, deserve more credit than that score indicates. We'll leave it again to our old pal Paul Rickson of Page 6, who liked everything about it, only noting that the slow pace of the scrolling might frustrate some players, but that it included most, if not all, of the ingredients of a high-class shoot-'em-up. That's enough for me to give it a few more tries myself. Okay, that's all for this time. Only 6 games, but a variety that I feel can satisfy the taste for most, if not all, Atari 8-bit and 400 Mini owners. Next time, we're going to tackle the library of Zeppelin games and their 20 budget releases for the Atari 8-bit machines. So until then, have fun playing your favorite budget computer game titles on the machine of your choice in the vertical blank.
We were children of the Silicon Revolution, an X generation conscripted to fight the console and home computer wars. A product of an analog 70s childhood, we came of digital age in the 80s, believing we could affect the world 8 bits at a time. Armed with joysticks, full-stroke keyboards, Jolt Cola, and MTV haircuts, we proceeded into the vertical blink. There, we stayed up late at night, devising incantations from D&D rulebooks and beginner's all-purpose symbolic instruction code. Video games were the match, and programming was the fuse, as the infinite possibilities of the digital world exploded into the internet age to come. We are Generation Atari.
Into the vertical blank.